Grant, my dear friend, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Hi, guys. Good to see you. Good to be here. And so I'm going to look at this thing. I'll give a brief introduction of myself and try not to go too much in depth. But what I was looking about was being able to say, okay, what does it mean to be manly in various industries across the board, and comparing military versus blue collar versus white collar versus very male dominated industries, and how we behave and how we can possibly change that behavior to improve others' lives as well as our own. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a small town called Johannesburg, South Africa, about 7 million people, give or take, tiny little town. And went from high school straight to the South African National Defence Force. It was conscription at the time into the army. Landed up in the Southwest Africa Special Forces unit that was mounted infantry, so riding horses, which no doubt makes Alicia very happy. I fought judo for Maccabi South Africa, competing overseas, and that was a lot of fun. I've flown aircraft and jumped out of airplanes since 1981, and been involved in everything from diesel fuel injection and engine mechanic all the way through to being the CEO of global multinational companies that do everything from aircraft manufacturer to indoor skydiving. So what I want to look at, and when I was approached initially by Alicia, was saying, okay, what do we need? What is the comparison between the various industries, and what does it mean to be a man within them? And I came to Seattle 23 years ago. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. 23 years ago, and coming from a place like South Africa, where it is, or it was, highly conservative for most of my life. Then in 1994, when Nelson Mandela was made president or became president, the exact other extreme. So we went from super conservative, religious dominated, almost Midwest Bible Beltish approach across the country to complete freedom of everything. And it has its good and its bad points, but I think that overall, allowing people their own choice allows for much more radical growth of both people and, of course, the community as a whole. But, the expectations and what we see within the communities, I want to look at either underscoring and or busting the myth of the blue collar versus the white collar male role, and looking at and discovering what best person for the job versus, okay, because you're male, this is what you need to do. The role of us in community, the family unit, and then most of all, obligations versus desired participant. When I looked at what Neil was saying, in the roles of what people do, when you look at things like, okay, who washes the dishes, who takes the kids out, who changes the diapers, we have such stereotypical roles, specifically in America, that it's either a man's job or a woman's job. And I think that as soon as we realize that certain things don't take the skill, and certain things that we are not good at, yet we claim to be good at them. Something that's very, very present today is the macho-ness surrounding COVID-19. We go out and think, well, we're male, we're tough, we don't need to wear a mask. This is all BS. And it's actually the exact opposite. It's a 0.3 micron particle. It doesn't care whether you're male or female. It doesn't care whether you're rich or poor. And I think that setting the role as this is what, it's not emasculating, it's not removing a social liberty. The social liberties get removed with wearing a seatbelt, with having to drive the speed limit. Those are the same restrictions for other people's safety that saying, okay, social distancing and wearing a mask is. And leaders of communities and the role in your household, you need to lead by saying, okay, this is what we need to do. So getting away from the COVID macho-ness and what we're doing, I wanted to go through just some basic ideas of what we expect versus the men's role in various industries globally. The Army. Now, up until, I think, 2015, women were not allowed to actually be in the battle role in the armed forces in the United States. And since then, still very small percentage, but there have been 0 incidents of anything that has been gender related of any significance inside the US military. And it's a very macho environment. It's a very, fighting, specifically being frontline, being able to take somebody's life with a weapon is difficult at first. And I think once you're trained, I think that the process becomes easier and easier. And that's the sadness, is that we have started to discount human life in such a way that there is no more value associated to it. And I don't think that that is a male or female role, but I do think that the macho-ness of wanting to carry a weapon, people say, you served in the military, you came from South Africa, what is your favorite thing about the United States? And I say simply, I don't have to carry a weapon. I have a problem, call 911 and find somebody who's fitter, healthier, younger, well-trained, did their training last week and the week before, and I don't actually have to carry a weapon. And it's not so in many other parts of the world. The second aspect is, looking at, and Neil was discussing his love and passion for martial arts. I think my parents' solution for my exuberance was to send me off to martial arts class at 5 years old, and I've done it ever since. And it was, well, this is how we're going to tire him out, and we don't have to deal with him because somebody else will beat the crap out of him. It wasn't a bad approach, but I think that the discipline, the understanding, the realization that there's some aspects that are not gender specific in fighting. I think Ronda Rousey has shown that in UFC and MMA stuff. I think that the process of being able to move your body efficiently is irrespective of gender. And we've made it a very male specific environment. And I think that that is wholly incorrect. The other side to it is that dominance, that maleness, the macho-ness, the strength has very few uses in our modern world. Computer coding, making movies, jumping out of airplanes. It's not, you don't need strength, you need skill. And I'll get to that in a minute in where we see it significantly, which makes me smile a lot. I'll jump into a bit of the aviation perspective. And it's amazing how much better women are in certain tasks because they are parallel processing and not linear. And men tend to be more linear, women tend to be more multitasking, parallel processing. And so flying a helicopter. When I owned a helicopter manufacturing company, we had a school, and the school used to bring along husband, wife would come to go and learn helicopters. And I'd say on day one, this is the divorce course. If you follow and focus, generally women do better than men because it's finesse, not strength. And you need to believe your instructors, follow it up, and actually understand what you're doing. And on day one, the wife is hovering and the man hasn't got off the deck yet. On day two, and she leaves the course and says, don't worry, honey, you'll get it tomorrow. On day two, she's already in the pattern and he's barely begun hovering. And she says, don't worry, honey, you'll catch up with me. By the Thursday morning, they're not talking. And by the Friday, they're leaving to go home on separate aircraft. and she is certified and he is not. And it works very similarly in when you look at finesse environments. You know, even though women are much better in those environments because of their patience, because of their linear skills, because of their parallel processing, 6% of US Air Force pilots are women. I think there have only been 2, maybe 3 Thunderbirds demonstration pilots that are women. It's a very male-dominated environment, yet when the women do participate on there, they don't participate at the lower levels. They actually participate in the highest levels of that particular team, which is the best of the best. In the civilian world, that number is not very different. It's 7%. So you look at the comparison and where we need to improve, and the improvements are including what we need to do to actually bring people into it. So we started a program. It was started by a small unknown actor, a chap called Harrison Ford. It was the Young Eagles program, where we've had 2.2 million kids learn to fly, where their original introduction is free through this program. And we have a much or significantly higher retention of women who stick through the program, or young women, young girls between 7 and 17, compared to that of boys. So for such a macho environment, the exclusion of women has been almost mandated. It's been a social norm. It's been, the kids all show an interest, and they say, the parents generally, or social norms say, no, this is not where you should participate. I look at the race right now and I try and behave equally to my 2 young children. They are 18 and 22, and they are both at the 70 plus real skydive level now, both certified B license holders. They've got hundreds of hours in a freefall wind tunnel, and they compete one-on-one, literally. It's been a pleasure to watch them compete and both bring each other up and teach each other where their skill set is missing. So I think that the social norms and how we go about it inside our American society is skewed towards the expectation that women and men will take on very specific roles. The most stark noticeable role, because it's in such a day-to-day life side, is probably more in my business dealings. When you look at people and everybody says, well, why can't everybody be Oprah? The answer is it takes huge sacrifice. You look at what it takes right now. Only 7% of top 500 or Fortune 500 companies have female CEOs. And that's not because we don't allow them in the glass ceiling. I actually believe that is not the issue. I think the issue is that the rest of the social norms don't change. So you sit there with understanding that the woman's role in the family doesn't get shortened, alleviated, or changed. We expect her to take on that role. And that's when I say we, men expect them to take on multiple roles and then still be successful outside of it, even though that is not where the focus is. So when you look at somebody like Oprah, who focused on the business, not on family, not on children, not even getting married, her focus was business. And I think that men do it in the reverse. Our focus is business, and it's to the detriment of the family unit. It's to the detriment of spending time and quality time with your kids. I happen to be particularly lucky that my passions are aviation, skydiving, the manufacturing side, all the stuff that both my kids seem to think is cool. So, I started falling out of airplanes in 1981, and now my kids at the same age, my daughter at the same age as I was when I was, just leaving high school, is with me in the sky, flying circles around me, which is a little embarrassing, but it's kind of nice to see that she's proficient, she's enthusiastic, my son is the same. And that family unit adhesion gets brought out where you bring them into your world rather than saying, this is not a world for you. And I think that's a a social and cultural norm where we stereotypically put in a gender bias really early on life in the United States. I think less so in other countries. Countries we can probably take a lesson from are countries like China, where it truly is best person for the job. In the United States, in most Western countries, we have very specific gender roles, and I think that goes into everything from our basis in religion and where we put it and what we're allowed to do, right up until, family unit, home, work environment. So looking at these and where we are in various aspects of it, in manufacture, when our group originally bought the helicopter manufacturing company, in the 123 people, we had 3 women. And the culture of the company was very male dominated, with very specific ideals, including language, behavior, job descriptions. And I aimed to change that significantly. And it changed the culture. It made the men behave. It made them act out less because they knew that they actually were having to be behaving in a more appropriate norm than not. And, we always hear the excuse, oh, that was just locker room talk. Well, in polite and normal society, that's not what happens. We shouldn't behave that way behind closed doors or not. It's a certain denigrating behavior that we need to get out of our social norm as socially acceptable. That includes when, senior leadership of our country make excuses that is a social norm and acceptable. It's not. It's not acceptable in front of your own friends. And when asked, would you behave that way? Most of the time, the answer is no, it's not. I understand that we can all imbibe and get ourselves a little tipsy and behave in ways that we probably regret the next morning. But as a social norm, we seem to think that is an acceptable method of behavior when you're with a closed group of friends and you need to change your behavior outwards. And my premise is saying, okay, if you learn to behave that way when you're with your closed group of friends, you'll behave normally. If you're with them and you're behaving normally in a normal social environment, you'd behave normally as well. I look at certain industries and certain sports. The UFC, MMA type world has suddenly got a lot of gender difference or gender merging, of where you're suddenly seeing people you're seeing women participate more and more, yet you don't see women and men participate against each other. And I think that there's certain areas where that can happen. And funnily enough, although only about 13% of professional skydivers are women, they are competing right alongside and beating out many of them male participants. And this is because of the ability to add finesse and control and thoughtfulness into the process. And I think that as we realize that in itself is an amazing skill, that we would become more appreciative of it in other areas of life, that it will become more prolific, and we won't have to be as macho as required by regular social norms. So where I'm right now is looking at, I had a skewed perspective. I grew up and went to an all-boys school, which when you've got a bunch of 13 to 19-year-olds all together, the requirement to be boy-like is accentuated. And the funny thing is, we still have this is how many years now, 40 something years later, 42 years later, we have a WhatsApp group with 41 of my previous classmates, and I swear they still behave like they're 14 years old, which I'm not quite sure whether that's a good or a bad thing, but the jokes, the humor, the photographs, the lack of boundaries is still that social norm. So we set our our gender expectations, our social norms, and our behaviors very, very early in life. And we had a large discussion a week and a bit ago about what you say matters. So whether you are commenting or looking or watching and people around you aren't necessarily, you're not talking to them, they're still hearing you. And when they hear you, that is the norm that gets established. So there's a large role and responsibility, specifically on acceptance, on understanding and giving kids of all genders the right role model and right opportunities to follow what they find passionate rather than you describe what they actually should be doing and letting the world around them do the same thing. Women engineers, you know, in our environment, we had in heavy manufacture, we had 0 women engineers, none. And I look at when I went to school for engineering in Cape Town, South Africa, we had 3, and the pressure on them to perform was unnecessarily harsh. And I think that we need to show the rule that the acceptance of best person for the job, rather than, okay, we need to show you up, is something we can start to do and engender very, very early on in the process. From Neil's side, martial arts has changed dramatically. When we did it, at the club I coached at, we're sitting there, we would have probably 10% would be young girls. And when I left a decade later, it was still in the 15 or 20% rather than 50% of the class. And I think that, given the new health upliftment and what's happening in the world today, is probably going to change. But that empowers or gets rid of the stereotypes really rapidly. When you've got some woman beating on you and she's beating you on the mat, you realize very quickly that actually it's about skill set and training rather than about how strong you are. The flying side, even today, whether it's aircraft or helicopters versus aeroplanes, in my aeroplane world, there are very few women at the top. Women like Connie Bolen, who is the president of the American Historical or Warbird Society. You look at some of the top aerobatic pilots; they can compete at any level. But majority of Army helicopter Black Hawk pilots are actually women, and they operate in an environment that is so male dominated in every other aspect other than the cockpit. And it's interesting to see. And the main reason for that is calmness under fire, calmness under stress, parallel processing, and all the things that we consider inherent in our macho-ness, but actually are more dominant in women. And recognizing that there's a lot, it uplifts us rather than puts us down and makes us feel like we're less competent. The same process happens, like I mentioned, in the aviation world, in the helicopter side, when we get parties that come into the iFly vertical wind tunnel. And I always say kids do better than adults, girls do better than boys, and women do better than men. And it's simple. Women listen. So when you're sitting there and doing and giving a short course that needs to be compressed, we find that the performance happens and you see the aggravation. On the other hand, we have men that come in for bachelor parties, they 3 doobies and 5 whiskeys into the evening, and they perform brilliantly because they're relaxed and they actually don't feel like they're competent because they are slightly inebriated. So they over listen and they perform well. They come a week and a half or 2 weeks later with their wife and family and their kids, and they can't fly for crap because they've forgotten what they learned 2 weeks before. And I think that understanding that the gender stereotypes is enforced by men. Women want to participate. They want to come out, and we feel threatened by it. This is my perspective, by the way. Please, I'm not making a generic statement here that all men are this way, but I think that men choose or feel threatened, and so prevent that happening because you feel like that's the way it should be. The South African side, I think that a very male-dominated, conservative environment, that it's less so now. And they've only had 20, 25 years of change from a conservative environment to a very, very non-conservative, permissive environment. And the male-female roles have changed dramatically in 2 decades. And I think that with not much effort, we could probably do the same in the United States and in other Western countries. So that's half an hour of chat. Are there any questions we can go through and go through? I mean, I can speak about my experience of what I've done and where I've been, but it's much easier to answer a direct question and actually expand on it than it is for me to talk about where I am and shared experience. So if there are any other questions out there, I'm open.
Grant, what are you currently doing right now?
Sure. So we have, that's not a short question. So 2 aspects right now. I've got 2 businesses. The first and primary business is focusing on proliferating the iFly indoor skydiving wind tunnels. And I don't know if you know much about them, but basically it's a skydive free-fall simulator. Mom, dad, and the kids, we take everybody from the age 3 to, I've flown a 90-year-old woman on her birthday, and we put you in a wind tunnel, and it is identical. In fact, if you can do it in the wind tunnel, you can do it in the air for real. Both my kids have several hundred hours in the wind tunnel. They went and fell out an aeroplane as soon as they were of age to be able to do so, and they went through their course in the minimum time possible because they'd already done it and had the skill set. And so we're building, right now we're finishing off building iFly Vancouver, and we're looking at bringing in iFly Hong Kong, and we're looking at Detroit, Las Vegas. Anyway, that whole business of building up the wind tunnels. The wind tunnel, it's an expensive business to bring to get involved in. But again, you look at that from a role standpoint, and from the build side, we have almost no female participation, very male-dominated environment. In the flying and instructional side, it's the women that do participate at that level are the best in the world. They are phenomenal. They will outfly anybody else in the tunnel. So you see what's happening. The other side to it is, and this is where, from a adult male standpoint, the best performers in the tunnel now are getting younger and younger because you don't have to be rated to fly in the sky. And the United States Parachute Association puts that at 18, which I still don't quite understand that. Anybody can fall through the air, and I'm not quite sure why 18 is that cutoff margin. But the indoor skydiving has no age limit. So some of the world champions and the top in the world are 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. And they outstanding and performing like doing things that as old people, we don't have the flexibility, we don't have the muscle memory, we don't have all the stuff that they're doing. And they are cultivating this at a very, very young age. So, and then the second business I'm involved in is we started a United States Department of Agriculture, a full USDA certified meat plant that makes biltong and droëwors. And that in English translation is, biltong is air-cured meat that is very similar to jerky. It's what jerky wants to be when it grows up. It tastes very good. It's very healthy for you. It's pure protein. It's got none of the sugars and preservatives in it. And it's a very good source of protein and bulk. In the South African military, you want to go out and take protein with you for 3 or 4 days. You throw a couple of sticks in, and you've got your meals for the next couple of days. And the other one is a thing called droëwors, which direct translation is dried sausage. And it's the same stuff, just put into a sausage casing. And because we control the fat content in it, it's 20% fat, 80% meat, and seriously is the yummiest stuff on the planet. Perfect meal, 3 or 4 sticks of it is the equivalent of a full meal, your protein intake for the day. And so very keto friendly, very, if you want to stay fit and trim, Biltong and Norwitz is the way to go. Does that answer?
Not only does it answer, we want more information. Like
yes, yes, I want that. Yes,
Happy
sign
to
me
supply.
up.
Happy
Thanks
to
for
supply.
our appetites. Okay, thank you.
So if you look at bossnacks.com, bossnacks.com, that's us. But if you contact me directly, I'm sure we can arrange a bit of a discount. It's being the USDA side, and which is a very expensive, crazy process to go through. That process, funny enough, the majority of women, the majority of people who actually train in that, because it is HACCP training, are actually women. Michelle Fannensteel is probably the top in the country, and she's the person who certified us. Generally, they are PhD food science people, and it's an interesting business to know how to keep meat from hurting you when stored outside of refrigeration. And it's quite a tricky deal. You know, if you look at jerky lasts superbly in the bag, but leave it out for a day or two and see what it's like to eat it. Not particularly pleasant. It's also cooked to death. Jerky is cooked at 165 degrees for 4 hours, and ours is slow cured. Think of Brezola. Think of European meats, where you see them hanging in cafes out in the open. For some odd reason, the USDA doesn't like that, and you have to process them indoors. But it's a very similar process, and very good, very healthy. And I live on it. Hence, I'm not a BMI of 55, 56, 57-year-old male.
I absolutely love that. I mean, I basically do, for the most part, intermittent fasting and primarily a keto diet. And that stems from my childhood when I was basically on a modified Atkins diet. So I kind of naturally go that way. I'll definitely be hitting you up after for this, because wow, that would be a game changer for me. I would love that. I have lots of jerky and I would love to switch.
Excellent. You know, the problem with jerky is, in order to make it taste good, when you've cooked it that long at that higher temperature, is they actually take needles and puncture the meat with the needles and then force in sauces and sugars. And the sauces and sugars to make it taste good. But essentially, if you ate jerky before that, it would be dried cardboard. And so, it's a very different process, where we take the meat and we actually air cure it and slice it up. And it's like having fresh Brezola. And I can sell it, we could probably supply it to you in the whole slab. And so it's a full, the steaks are probably a foot and a half, probably longer, and we cure it in the whole steak format and then slice it afterwards. And because there's no sugars added, you'll end up getting a protein and electrolyte intake that's essentially body balanced. And the only reason that there's any Biltong or Norwitz left in a bowl is if people have oversalted it. But short of that, every time you put it out, it's gone. And I can't bring it home because my family gobble it at a rate that probably would skew the perspective of the factory.
Okay, Grant, who's your hype man? Who's your hype man? Who do you have that's promoting this for you? What's the deal? Because
I think Calvin's asking for the job. You look at you.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah. Anytime. I think that those people that have been to South Africa, the first time you mentioned Biltong, they go, "Oh, where can we buy some?" And Neil, are you in LA?
Yes, I'm in LA. Yeah.
There are a couple of places in West Hollywood where there are Biltong stores, but they're not USDA certified, but they can sell directly to you over the counter.
West Hollywood makes a lot of sense. Yes.
A lot of South Africans there. It's we're all over the place, but it's actually made by a German butcher there that spent some time in South Africa. I can give you the address and you can pop in and see, or I can just send you some with pleasure.
Colorado,
the outdoor lifestyle and what's happening in Colorado would lend itself specifically to this, especially, whether it's skiing or hiking or biking or trail riding or whatever is required, that it would be a great idea. So sure, I will happily send it to you and let me know what you do.
We'll talk.
I look forward to it. And so, from my side, the shared experience, I'm not sure what else we can do, but the shared experience and the premise of blue collar versus white collar, does it make a difference? What are the examples we set? I actually think that the more macho the work environment, the less macho one has to be in public and family unit. And I think it actually works inversely to what the social norm is expecting. I think that the white collar jobs, you get used to a certain hierarchy in the office, and then you come home, and because there's a hierarchy, and generally the males at the top and the women are not, whether you look at secretarial work, whether you look at research, whether you look at the film business, where it generally is skewed to men at the top, that you come home with a certain expectation and you perpetuate that in the household. Not that most women of the house will let you, but when they let you, it's accentuated. And I think that the blue collar is the reverse. When you get to be super macho the whole day because you have to behave a certain way because of the people around you, I think you're quite relieved not to be macho when you go home. You can drop the facade and be a normal human being. And I look at that, everything from engine fitting to aviation to business, and I think that trying to be the person you are for real all the time would get rid of the social stereotype. That's my contribution. If there's anything else, I'm happy to answer. And I'm sorry, am I a little short on where we are? I am about 10 minutes short.
No, it's fine. You've got 16 more minutes for people to ask questions, to expound on stories and knowledge. And
we don't want to start the story thing. We'll be here for 4.5 hours.
It's true. Grant is an amazing storyteller. He's one of my favorites. And I've actually flown with Grant in one of the wind tunnels. So I can vouch for his expertise and how incredibly fun that is firsthand. He and I have been friends for 10 years, and he actually took me to, I think it was like the second time we'd ever met, I got to fly with him in a wind tunnel. So he's just very generous with wanting everybody to experience flying. But Grant, anybody else, questions for Grant? He has lived a very dynamic life, so just throw it out there.
I must admit, it's a little embarrassing sort of being on display with everybody being able to ask questions of your personal life.
Well, I definitely want to give that wind tunnel a try. You had said, what is it in? You have one in Vegas? Is that?
There's actually the Vegas one is not the present Vegas one is not. We're building new tunnels. Where are you in Los Angeles?
I'm in Hollywood proper.
So there is a
right
small tunnel, an old tunnel, not particularly great to fly in, at Universal Studios.
Okay. Right.
It's a very small tunnel. It's actually half a tunnel, just because of the space and what we did. It was more for show and to be at Universal. The Ontario, there's one in San Diego, there's one in San Francisco. But to get you into a real tunnel, I come down relatively often. So my next trip down there, let's get together and we'll go for a drive down to one of the bigger tunnels down south and go and hop in and go fly. I'll get you.
Sounds perfect.
It's actually an awesome experience. We can get you to be the equivalent of about a 50 jump skydiver in about 15 minutes in the tunnel, because we can, skydiving itself, generally the learning period is about 25 seconds of learning in a jump, maybe 20 seconds, 25 seconds. So if I can have you in a tunnel for 2 minutes and actually coach you, I can fly up to you and get your body position right and your head position and show you what you're doing. It's so much more productive. And then I can take you out of the tunnel. We have a time delay video that's 2 minutes behind, and I can actually point out what you think you're doing versus what you should be doing. And then you get right back in again 5 minutes later, and then you solve that problem. So we can progress you really, really rapidly in tunnel flying versus real skydiving. The other side to it, of course, is there's no real limit. We teach you to fly on your stomach. And then when you get that right, we flip you on your back and you have to relearn all the muscle memory all over again because everything's in the other direction. And when you get that right, we put you in a seated position. So you're basically flying as though you're sitting in a chair. And when you get that right, we put you inverted and you fly on your head and you do the same thing. And then when you get that right, we start to combine them all so that you can go from stomach to back to sit to head down. And the skill set required is to make you fly then with other people. So once you can do it on your own, then we put you with somebody else, and then we match you with somebody else. So you start to do formations, and it's aerial ballet with extreme finesse. And you know, you're in a 120-mile-an-hour wind, so you get to realize how the wind affects you, and you can fly yourself pretty efficiently. When you look at Ironman, the stunts for Ironman were actually done by a guy called Andy Farrington, who jumps here in they own the club in Shelton, Washington. And a lot of those were done for real. The guy's actually in an Ironman suit flying through the air and standing up and doing all those tricks are actually real body flying. It's not, you know, CGI.
Huh.
Pretty cool.
So Grant, is there a wind tunnel in Colorado?
There is actually. Yeah, iFly. Look up. I think it's iFly Denver.
iFly Denver. Okay.
I'll tell you now in 1 second. Yeah, iFly Denver. It is right off the 470 on Yosemite. Yeah, and hopping in the tunnel there, it's an amazing experience. The nice thing is that when you get in, if you get in with kids, you get in with whomever you get into the tunnel with. It's the one environment where you have a completely shared experience. It's a foreign medium for you to have your body in. It's a foreign aspect of how your body reacts to the wind. And it's funny, but it's one of the few places where you can take a 5-year-old kid and a 40-year-old adult and a 60-year-old adult, male or female, and they have the same experience. They'll come out, they'll have a huge shit-eating grin on their face, and they will have experienced body flight as though you were a bird. You know, the expression is only skydivers know why birds sing. So, you know, it's that true freedom of body and movement. It's the ultimate in dance.
Awesome. Okay.
Well, you want to get flying? Let me know, and I will make it happen.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Anytime. And you know, Neil will do the same. I actually was in LA last week. When I come down again, I'll give you a call and we'll drag you off and bring some of your team or not, and we can go and fly in a wind tunnel. If I come down by aircraft, we can put people in the co-pilot seat, and you can, whether I'm there in a fixed wing or helicopter, we can figure out what to do, and you can go and have some fun. It's any time, guys. I'm sorry, I'm all of 9 minutes early. Is there something else that I need to do? Keep going. Well, other experiences, you know, a destination, which is, it's kind of funny because supposedly macho destination, but when COVID ends and the plague stops and we can get back to normal life, Air Venture, which is in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, is the largest air show in the world, and it is truly amazing. We have about 1.2 million people, 14,000 aircraft. It's the busiest airport in the world for 7 days. Air traffic controllers vie for the right to come control traffic. It's a huge honor to come control traffic at that event for the 7 days. And if you want to see anything that is cool, a lot of aviation, but also a lot of just other cool stuff. If you are coming to the show and you're going to see it on foot, if you ran around the show for all 7 days, you will not be able to see the entire show. It is, if you think of CES with toys, times 10. And it's got everything. And so I suggest that as a destination for people who, if you want an amazing family event, if you want to see people like Paddy Wagstaff, who's one of the world's top aerobatic pilots, or Sean Tucker, performing in a way that show you that it's got nothing to do with gender, it's everything got to do with skill set. If you want to see, Caroline Jensen, who was the #3 Thunderbird pilot, or Connie Bolen, who her standard ride daily, you've probably had her fly you. She's a Delta 757 captain, I think, but flies a P-51 Mustang on weekends. There are some incredible sights to be seen. And if you guys let me know a little bit ahead of time, we can arrange for you to see things a little bit behind the scenes. And it's a fun place to go. Certainly a good way to spend a week. Get ready to rough it, because all hotels and houses are booked for 40 miles around. Most people sleep under the wing of an aircraft, or you buy a 4-person sleep house and you sleep 24 people in it. You get to know a lot of people you didn't know before really, really, really well. And you figure out that you can still sleep on a couch if you have to. It's an interesting place, and shower in public toilets, but it's an adventure. And from the iFly side, I think right now there are 93 operating tunnels worldwide. So if you're in the UK, if you're in France, if you're in Germany, if you're in Russia, if you are in Australia, we can probably find an iFly tunnel for you to fly in. It's a worthwhile experience. It's a great experience for the whole family. And I think our rule is out of diapers. So 2 to 102, somewhere in between that, you're probably just fine. I think that one can imagine you've got 120-mile-an-hour wind and a full diaper. It doesn't fly particularly well. Short of that, it's a fun time. And from the business side and from the protein side, I look forward to being able to supply you guys and see what it is, and let's get South African products and biltong and our droevorst, the dried sausage, out there. And I think that it being healthy, it's a good snack all around. You can eat it all day. Grate it onto salads. Put it on pizza. It's yummy. It's better than pepperoni, I can tell you right now. Well, any more questions before I depart?
The meat in and of itself, I don't do pork. So what kind of meat is it?
I don't do pork either. It's actually USDA beef. We use bottom round flat or silver side, which is our preferred cut. We only get from top line known butcheries, so it's not a standard butcher. We actually get it on an industrial scale. So we get from a company called E.C. Wilson, which is known for their top quality of their sourcing of their meat. So we worry about humanely culled. If it has not been done so, you can taste it in the meat because of the adrenaline. Because you're tasting the beef, it's not hidden by sauces, it's not hidden by process, it's not cooked to death. You're actually tasting the meat. So the meat has to be really, the only way to make good biltong is start with good beef in the first place. Yeah. With jerkies, you can start with really cheap meat, right, and you can cover it in sauces and process and hide what the base tastes like. With biltong, you can't do that. So it's really, really excellent product.
Good stuff, Grant. You've been excellent. What's the best way to get in touch with you so we can?
I think let Alicia make the intro. She'll put us all together. Let her act as point person, and we'll make it happen. Right. Same thing, guys. Whether it's flying, skydiving, other requirements of where I can help, please let me know, and I will point you in the right direction. If you want to fall out an airplane, or if you want to get involved in the local EAA chapter, if you look up Experimental Aircraft Association and you're interested in just seeing what flying is all about, look up EAA, EAA.org. If you want to get your kids 7 to 17 involved in becoming pilots and aviators of any sort, look up youngeagles.org. That's the program that we said. Sean D. Tucker, the world aerobatic champion, and Harrison Ford was our first chairman of the organization. It's an amazing organization globally. And I say globally, we've flown over 2.2 million kids. I think Harrison took the 2 millionth kid for a flight at Oshkosh Week, which was pretty cool. But reach out to me through Alicia. We'll put you in contact, get you in. But getting hold of these organizations is pretty cool, and they do amazing work globally.
Thank you so much, Grant, for coming here today and sharing all of your wisdom and your connections and being able to inspire the guys with flying and eating delicious meats and a different way of processing it. And, you know, you're just general enthusiasm and wonderful characters. So
my pleasure. I hope the summit goes well for all of you guys. Look forward to hearing some others, and let me know. We'll contact soon. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.